few months back, I was listening to a podcast on BBC. They had a few guests who were talking about Hannah Arendt's book called Banality of Evil. The book essentially revolves around Adolf Eichmann's trial. Adolf Eichmann was one of the top lieutenants of Adolf Hitler and was responsible for what is now known as the Holocaust. Key question I believe Hannah was trying to ask and answer: what led to so many people come together, work together, coordinate, and deliver so much of pain to so many humans? What makes us as humans deliver pain to the others? I think that's the essential question. And as we do that, are we normalizing it in some sense? If we go down the path of the first question, see humans as in some sense, there is a way in which people say universally human beings are maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. So we are constantly looking for opportunities, situations, experiences, objects, interactions, so as to minimize pain and maximizing pleasure. But when we do that, we are also embedded in social systems, which means we are interacting with the other. So imagine on the x-axis, we have constant desire and actions oriented towards pleasure for ourselves. So on the x-axis, you'll have for ourselves, and on the right hand side, you'll have pleasure, and on the left hand side, you'll have pain. And on the y-axis, you'll have on the top side pleasure for others and pain for others. So we can see in this quadrant that we constantly have interactions and outcomes that we get from those efforts and interactions, and we desire certain kind of pleasure and pain. I'm not saying that we are always observing of this and always very, very calculative of this, but by and large, we do engage into these kind of activities with people around. Then comes the question of normalizing. So we know from some personal experiences and or insights from some of the research that over a period of time we get used to things. We start taking things for granted. We start taking certain experiences for granted, certain people for granted. While we may have started in some of those cases with a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement of having them in the first place. But then over a period of time, in some sense, we start developing some kind of, taken for grantedness towards it. Now, while that is true, and we have heard that a lot in terms of pleasure that we derive from it or the excitement that we derive from such experiences, is it possible that over a period of time, there are certain kind of pain that we also get used to, that we start normalizing? And not only do we normalize it for our own self when it is inflicted by others on us, or we inflict it on our own self in some sense, but is it also the case that as we start inflicting it on the others, we also start normalizing it? In other words, as we get used to pleasure and we want certain different kind of pleasure or a higher pleasure or more pleasure or of a different kind or the same kind, we also start developing. Is it also the case that we also start developing similar attitudes or similar dispositions towards pain? So we get used to them and we are okay with that as being the threshold, and then something else could be more pain inducing while this is copable in some sense or okay with us. There is another nuance or a rabbit hole to this. So we obviously are in interactions with many people around us. And in those interactions, there are different experiences that are given birth or they rise, and some of those experiences are painful. So suppose if it were to be the case that you interact with someone and that interaction is causing you pain in some sense, imagine you go back and tell the person that this is causing you pain, and you have the leeway of telling them, assuming that that is the case, but the person doesn't give you remedy, or the person justifies it in some sense. And imagine the role reversal where you cause it to somebody else and the person is telling you about this. And again, you don't give them remedy, you end up giving justification. So what happens is over a period of time is two phenomena. One is not only what we described earlier, our coping mechanisms towards that threshold of pain needs to be brought in. Either we start taking that as normal, that yes, this person is just consistently just doing this and we need to just take it in our stride, and or it is the case that we also start inflicting it on that person or inflicting it on somebody else because many a times when we interact with people, we may not be in the position to inflict it on them in the manner, because we may have large harm or large cost as a consequence to if we inflict pain on them. There's another nuance here, or a double click. Sometimes when we deliver an action to the other, or deliver a word or a sentence or a speech or instruction or a command or a feedback to the other, or we ask somebody to do something, we do that knowing fully that in the short run, or currently, or in the long run, it may harm, but overall it's in for the help of the person. So imagine on the x-axis you are actually causing harm on the right hand side of the x-axis, or on the left hand side of x-axis as help, and on the y-axis you have in order to eventually harm on the top side and help on the lower side. So you get actually four quadrants. Sometimes you harm to harm the person, sometimes you harm to help the person, sometimes you help to harm the person, and sometimes you help to help the person. Again, these things are further to be nuanced, because it depends on situation to situation, person to person, and then short term, long term orientation, which we can get into in on any different voice note. But that's the basic construct, and we'll get on to more nuances on this in the next episode.